and you guys have seen him up front. He takes all the amazing photos of the 1 million event. And this morning, he's going to be presenting and talking about his business. He also does drone photography and other things of that nature, so he's got some items for show and tell here, and looking forward to it. So, with no further ado, Jason. Yay!
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
A lot of you kind of know me already, but I'm Jason Collin, and my business is Jason Collin Photography. It's nice to see some familiar faces in the audience, and since I've been coming here for about a year and a half now, almost every Wednesday except for about 3, I'm glad to share my story with you now because probably it's a little bit surprising. I thought about long on when to start the story. When did I really start the business, or when do I think my photography story began? So I decided on 2001 when I got my first digital camera. It was an Olympus 2040 EZ. I had recently moved to South Korea, and I was living in a provincial town in South Korea. I took the bus up, or maybe a train up to Seoul, to an electric town area, and bought this camera. 2.1 megapixels, as you can see, which was pretty much the best you could get at that time. And if you're wondering, what does that exactly mean? That's a 1600 by 1200 max resolution on there. The more shocking thing though was getting the memory card. So I was planning a trip to Cambodia and Thailand, a 3-week trip in that summer. And memory cards were very expensive and not like they are now. So I spent $300 on a memory card for 512 megabytes. So, and this is a 3-week trip, right? So I couldn't even use the max resolution of 2.1 megapixels that much. So most of my photos from the best trip of my life are at 640 by 480, which on my 4K screen at home now looks about like a postage stamp. So it's kind of shocking. These photos you see here are mostly 640 by 480. This one might have been 2.1 megapixels. So at this time, digital photography was pretty much brand new. And seeing yourself on the back of a camera was a new phenomenon. And you didn't really see photos of yourself all the time like you do now. If you did, you pulled them out of your wallet and said, oh, there's me. But that didn't usually happen too much. So traveling with a digital camera was really a unique experience because I could show all these people the photos I took right at that same time. And of course, in Cambodia at the time, it was still basically a new country really opening up for tourists at that time. They really just started around that time having tourism and people traveling in there. I'm normally a shy person, but when I travel, I don't know, I tend to meet people and there's always just people hanging out. So I was by this lake and these kids kept coming. So this is probably like the 6th photo we took because I take a photo and then everybody else, I want to get in that too. So then he came in and we ended up with all these kids. It was raining somewhere and these monks were like, come on in here out of the rain. So I hung out with these monks for an afternoon somewhere in the jungle. And then these girls were just hanging out at the top of a temple on a weekday afternoon. So like we chatted it up for that afternoon, like what's going on with them. So that's kind of how my interest in photography started. Digital really helps because I like the immediacy of it, where film, I always used 1 hour processing because I wanted to see the photos right away. Let's jump to, well, these are my 3 real photos I took kind of there when I started to get a little bit serious about creative. These were 2.1 megapixel photos, which is still pretty small by today's standard, but jump to 2008. I'm now living in Tokyo, Japan. And when I get these ideas in my head sometimes, like, why don't I have this? Or why don't I do this? So, I don't know, I woke up one morning, and I was like, why don't I have a real camera? So, I went to one of the 3 Best Buy size camera stores that were within a 12-minute walk of my apartment and started testing out cameras. And I settled on getting a Nikon D80, my first DSLR. So with that camera, I thought it would be like a magic wand, actually. So I got this camera, just spent $800 on this camera and got a lens, just because, I don't know, I thought I should have it. And I'm walking around the streets, and my first day out with this camera, I assumed, like you said, I'm gonna go out and get these Nat Geo covers one after another because I have this camera. I couldn't even get a pigeon in focus that first day. So it was kind of a wake-up experience, but I walked the streets there for really hundreds of hours. I took about 10,000 photos just in that 1 year I was walking around there. And in that process, I kind of learned how to shoot in manual mode. I learned how to get well-exposed photos and sharp. And this went on to, or allowed me to start teaching later on. And I was able to teach this 5-step process, this very real-world, practical process of how to do photography. Jump anywhere. In that process of going around and getting blurry pigeon photos, I did eventually get better. And living in a big city like Tokyo or New York or London, there's things always going on. So it's kind of a photographer's dream to just walk out your door and have things to photograph. This was my first photo of kind of notoriety. It got published in the largest English language weekly magazine there as the photo of the week, and then they went on to use it for the calendar. I was particularly proud of this because this is from Coming of Age Day, perhaps the most photographed event in the world. Everybody who turns 21 puts on kimono, girls, or men and women, and go to temples, and there are so many people making photos and doing that, so I was really pleased that my photo was chosen for that particular reason. Jump to 2009. So now I am back in Florida after 10 years abroad living there, and I was working as an English teacher mostly in Korea and Japan. So I came back, and if you notice the time, that's about when the economic downturn happened. So my plan kind of was, maybe I'll just be a teacher at a school. Like, I was just teaching Japanese businessmen and women and college students conversational English. That's gonna be the same thing as teaching 8th graders math at a charter school, right? Yeah. That lasted 3 months. So I was like, this doesn't work. I'm like, there's too many decisions, I can't handle this. So there were no other jobs. I'd go to apply for things like I wasn't even qualified for because I can't use Excel and that stuff. So there's 50 people there, so I just looked at, there's a room like this with these applicants, and I just turn around and walk out. So I decided I needed to make my own job. So that's when I just decided to become a photographer. Again, no real plan, just kind of, big timing it and stuff. And sometimes that works, sometimes that does not work. 2009 to 2014, had the business going. It was on a steady rise until about 2013, and I had my peak year then, which was 28,000, which I thought was pretty darn good for that time. I'm just doing what I want as a photographer. But then, the injured years. So in 2014, things kind of started going down. There were a number of factors that all came together. And then 2015, when I tore my ACL, that kind of put the nail in the business for that first iteration of it. I actually had to live at a friend's house, and then after that, I had to live at my mom's condo in her spare bedroom there, and it's kind of hard to do a business when you're 2 hours away from where you're established. So got to a pretty low point where I was just in pain constantly. I was doing physical therapy every day of the week, pretty much, and I wasn't really feeling any way to get out of this situation. I'm like, I'm trapped. I can't really start my business here. It's the same situation economically there, not many jobs that I'm actually qualified for. So much like when I decided to go to Asia, that was right after graduate school. I went to Asia within 2 weeks. It was a 2-week decision. So one Saturday night, I kind of had enough, and I was at a point where I felt like I had nothing to lose. So I just packed up my car and my dog with whatever I could fit, and the 4 months on the road period, where this is a true story. I had $900 in my bank account and no plan. I just packed up and went. I had one friend, an old friend from Korea who had a farmhouse in Iowa, and I texted him as I'm packing up my stuff. Like, he always talks about, come visit, come spend some time on the farm. I was like, do you still have that space? He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, I'm gonna come on up for a few days. He's like, all right, come on up. So, first night, me and my dog, we spent the night in the back of my car because I didn't have enough money to stay in a hotel. And it was still in Florida, so it was kind of warm. We got there and didn't know what I was gonna do. I ended up spending 2 months at his farmhouse. I discovered this ability to do photography through a real estate company where they send you out to make one photo of the front of an apartment building for $5. But some cities would have 60 or 80. So I would wake up and get out at first light, I was cold, by the way, in November and December. I realized coming from Florida, it was quite cold. But it was a way to make some money and kind of stockpile it. So I started to formulate a plan. I'm like, oh wait, so these cities in Iowa have that. What about some other cities? So once I got a little bit of help, also one client I had in Florida just gave me $1,000. He's like, what do you need? I'm like, I need $1,000. He's like, you got it. And he's like, I'm like, I can't really accept it. He's like, just take it. And when you're successful or something else, do something like that for someone else. So I've not given anyone a total $1,000 straight up, but whenever there's any charity or something like that, I donate headshots, I donate services for that. So I really appreciate what that person did for me at that time, because that doesn't really happen too often. So, me and Kiki, freezing our butts off, going through Oklahoma, we actually eventually came here to Albuquerque, and I did a bunch of those property shoots here, and then happened to meet Jessica, but continued on because I had more work to do, and I went as far as Reno. So started in Florida, went to Iowa, all through the Midwest, and then ended up at Reno, and then decided to come back here and give things a try here. So that was 2017. After 4 months on the road, we were pretty exhausted. Both me and my dog was great, because we're in a car for about 7 hours, making about 90 to 100 stops at all these apartments. Coming here, 2017, still on the road a little bit in the first half. I was working for that company. I went back east and did some work for them over the summer. So really, I consider starting the business in Albuquerque in about August of 2017. And I was pretty determined to not repeat the same things as in Florida. Because you think, or at least I thought I was working hard and making a max effort, and it really wasn't. When I came back here, or when I was here, I realized this is not the max effort you need to make to be successful, especially in a creative business like this. So I was determined not to have those, so I worked nonstop. I became super networker. I used to go to networking events, talk to one person I know, and then leave. So I joined the Hispano Chamber of Commerce. I started coming here. Boom. I met this one client and also entered the drone. This one client named Gene is quite this eccentric character. Brian knows about him a little bit now. I believe, if I recall correctly, it was a $100 Craigslist ad I responded to. And over the course of time, I built him up into a client that now pays me thousands to go out and photograph empty pieces of land in the desert. So it's also a story of cultivating clients and having that one right client that accounted for about 22% of my business for that first year, maybe the first 2 years. He suggested get a drone. He paid for the drone. I did the first 3 videos for free. They were not very good, so he didn't get much value for money on those. But that's how I also leverage things too. I always try to find a way to get things for my clients that make them better, but also benefit me too. So that was a case like that. But it also allowed me to double what I did for him. So instead of just getting money for photos, now I'm getting the same money for doing a drone video. So now when I go out to these, I'm making double money. So that was a really key moment to increasing my business, and I got my Part 107 certification so that I can fly commercially. Jump to some examples. If any of you follow my work, you see I'm out in the desert quite often, and these are some of the images I get to see, going to very remote places, miles down dirt road. And it's kind of my niche that I had that allowed me to be successful and take the business to a new level, having this kind of foundation. Each month, these clients have work for me. So, 2017 to 2019, growth years, really new to me to have this kind of growth. So if you recall, the most I ever made in Florida in 5-6 years there was $28,000. So my first year here in 2017, which was only really half in Albuquerque, some of it was on the road too, but coming in around 40K. Last year, 2018, 20% growth, which I was shocked because I'm always used to things going down. And then this year, I knew I was doing better than 2018 even, but when I crunched the numbers to make this slide yesterday, I was like, oh really, 50% growth over what 2018. So the trajectory, I don't imagine it's gonna keep going like that by next year, but it was very pleasant, and it showed me that the max effort you need to make to be successful in creative business is far beyond what I thought it was when I was in Florida. And the services I provided were not as good as what I do now, of course. And the diversity in the services I offer, adding drone video, adding better headshots, adding more food photography. I photographed the mayor, stuff like that. Not my Ferrari, there's some clients there. What's new for 2019 and beyond? So, this growth allowed me to reinvest in the business, which is something I've kind of spoken about during the lightning round here sometimes, saying that people talk about, you got to invest in your business. No one ever complained about my image quality at all. Yet, and I have no competition in the rural land real estate business at all. But for some reason, I sold all my cameras and got all this new stuff, and upgraded my drone as well, and that was a big change last month. I also hired an assistant. I have a couple of assistants I made contact with and have them stand by if I need to for shoots. And I'm also trying to get more and more clients to add drone, not just photos, add some aerial photos, add some drone video. So that's what my plan is for 2019 and going into 2020, adding more and more of that. So this was also a hard question why I didn't present, because I'm like, what am I going to say is my biggest challenge? Because you just saw what you just saw there, right? So it kind of seems like, well, what's your challenge? You have no challenges. Well, I feel like the work I do is good, and I like to do commercial photography, and I like to make photos for people's businesses, because my photos and how I differentiate myself from lifestyle photos, I make photos for people so they can make money. Lifestyle, you make photos so people can make memories, right? So I feel the photos I make will make people money. But I also don't have much creative challenge in it. I've become so skilled and used to doing it from the past 10 years that my challenge now is to find jobs that are more creatively challenging, where I can hire a team, or there's a creative director and they're like, we want to have like this one photo and it takes 3 hours to get this one photo or something like that. I would really like to expand and do more of that. So that's kind of my challenge I'm looking at for myself, to just be more into things more creatively. Yeah. Sonia?
What?
Oh yeah, Q&A time? Oh.
Don't look at me.
Oh yeah, I forget, yeah. Oh, Q&A time, and I will repeat the question for Facebook probably. Oh, Charles, yeah, sorry.
Did you fall over?
I'm as confused about this process as anyone, I think. So we're going to go into Q&A. The idea here is to help Jason and answer his biggest challenge and give thoughts and questions that might provoke him to think outside of where he's currently been. So, Jason.
So weird to be in the other end of the Q&A. All right. Yes.
Can you just briefly talk about how you moved into other aspects than just real estate? Because, like you just said, you moved into it, but you didn't give any kind of detail.
Right. The question was, how did I kind of move into real estate, and maybe what did I transition from? So in Florida, like most photographers, I started out as a lifestyle photographer doing family portraits and weddings. And since I lived in Florida, beach weddings and beach portraits were a huge thing. So I was working for other companies, kind of. They would get the bookings, and I would make them money, and they would pay me some of that, but then they get the referrals, and they get all of that. And also, I felt kind of phony, like photographing weddings, because a lot of wedding photographers say they love their clients, and they love, doing this. And I love like 3 things in the world, right? So, and it's kind of also, it's super weird to be at somebody's like happiest day of their life, and then I'm going home going, yep, I'm just editing these photos on a Saturday night, and these people are still having the happiest day of their life. It was great getting cake, but don't get me wrong. And also, I felt like that business was changing rapidly. Everybody was getting a DSLR camera, and the market was going down. So if you were established, you could still make decent money if you had a studio. So I transitioned to commercial photography because I felt businesses still had money at that time. And it's kind of the stuff I felt better doing. I felt more passionate doing that kind of stuff and making these great photos so people could make money from those photos. So when I came here, the land kind of just happened by accident, by answering that Craigslist out. And that client just clicked. when you deal with land, you have to deal with title companies and this stuff, and if you don't know anything about that, apparently most title companies in New Mexico are extremely incompetent. And people who own this land probably haven't even seen it in 10 years, and they're extremely slow at signing documents and paperwork to get paid money for land they've probably never even seen and just inherited. So when I work with this client, I'm very efficient, very competent, and I think we just clicked. So from there, I just expanded my client base, and then commercial photography in the city, my work transitioned to, and by just going to networking events and getting FaceTime, and some people I met through here have become clients and stuff like that. Hope that answers. Yes.
Alan Ramos, New Mexico Kids Matter. Have you thought of creating strategic alliances with creative directors?
The question was, have I thought about making strategic alliances with creative directors? I have not, because I do not know any creative directors, and I have not at the time sought out any to see, because I was working on my own skills and my own equipment to make sure that the challenge I was talking about, I can actually do that kind of job. So
my point is,
yeah.
is you put that as a goal of working on big projects that have a creative director, but that would depend on this kind of cosmic synergy coming together.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you work with creative directors who could bring you into a project, then you wouldn't have to depend on the cosmos as much as something that you had a little bit of control over.
I've depended on the cosmos a lot, as you can see from the story and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's something, and that's kind of something I'm asking for the community. If you know creative directors, or know someone who knows someone like that, for introductions that way, or how to go about even introducing myself to that, or working with them, since I don't really have a portfolio to say, look, I work with this crew to make this photo, like that. So that's kind of what my ask that will be for the community. All right, I have to remember the order or something. Let's see.
We have a Facebook question from Terry Alfering.
Oh, I know that guy.
What is your favorite type of thing to photograph in your personal time?
The Facebook question from Terry Alfring, who you guys may not know, we've been friends since 7th grade, so he's my oldest friend. Thanks for watching, Terry. What's my favorite thing to photograph personally? So, oh, okay, Jess is telling me to say the dogs, okay.
I say cars.
Oh, cars. Oh, cars. Yeah, okay, yeah. In reality, yeah, cars. Like, I love to go to car shows and photograph cars. I'm going to Santa Fe tomorrow to photograph a client. I love Aston Martin, so I'll be photographing his Aston Martin, so I'm super excited about that, except it might be 30 degrees and snowing. So cars is pretty much my favorite personal thing. If someone could just pay me to photograph cars, that'd be awesome. Trying to keep up. Steve, right?
Yes. Have you reached out to the camera union for the film industry? Because I have friends that work with drones in the movie industry, and I don't know how many certified drone pilots are here.
The question was, have I reached out to kind of the movie industry about
the camera union?
The camera union, and about being a drone pilot for them, because how many there? I know one person who does that and flies. He's based out of Santa Fe, and we keep trying to meet, but he's crazy busy and I'm crazy busy, and it hasn't happened yet. So I have one contact there I'm trying to make happen and stuff. So that would be my one lead, and then hopefully that will lead to more, because he actually makes things for real movies and real actual commercials. Sorry, Urban Farmer.
Yeah, Matt, I'm Urban Farmer. What I think would be interesting, have you done any work with like dynamic events, things that are already moving, like races? There's a big BMX scene here, skate scene.
Second place, 1982 New England Championships.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you have this amazing camera equipment and the ability to get into unique places to do unique shots, being able to capture things that are not just static, like landscapes, seems like a unique thing that you'd be able to do. So, essentially, doing the endurance bike races, being able to track that, doing photography at the race course, maybe to do race photography. I don't know. That seems like an angle that might be worth exploring.
The question is, do I photograph more dynamic things rather than static land and things like that? I guess I forgot to mention I also do events and specialize in event photography. So I haven't done, I've done sports when I lived in Florida, because there was a lot of triathlons and things like that, and equestrian events I started out. But things like that I don't do too much, because they put a tremendous wear and tear on your camera. Because you can go and shoot like 4,000 or 5,000 shots and not get, I need to get paid like $4,000 or $5,000 to do that, and they're paying $400 or $500. So I'm putting a lot of wear and tear on my camera for a small return. So So that's why I haven't done those too much. But I would definitely be interested in doing that for getting specific shots, not documenting the whole of it like that. Thank you. Yes?
Hi, Jason. Chris Youngman from Cafe Development. Question for you is, do you license the video content either as a stock videos? Is that something that you do?
Yeah, the question was, do I license any of my video that, oh, stop playing, that was up there, because I've had that question a couple times, and I just have not had time to look into that, because I know I get through Instagram, someone comments on my drone video saying, hey, put your stuff here. So I have not looked into that yet, but it is on my radar, and that's one of my other challenges. It's just me, basically, and sometimes just assists, and sometimes I have other assistants. So I find there's not enough time in the day, even starting at 8 and finishing at 11 or 11:30, there's just not enough time to get to that stuff at the present moment. But hopefully December, when things slow down a little bit, I can catch up on things like that. Because I would definitely like to have my existing photos, my existing video content make more money for me. So whenever I can sell a print or license a photo image, I'm like, yes, found money, like that. So it's definitely something I would like to do, and that's probably the only way I can really grow as one person, because I can only do so much photography and stuff in a day. Thank you. Right.
Brian Steiner, Novental Custom Software. Nice job, Jason.
Thank
My main point to address your scaling issue is to define a process for the things that you can delegate and then hire someone, right? In a way that reduces your risk, without committing to, full-time employment type of thing, but giving them the consistency that a person would need to stick with you. And then to not be afraid to end that if it's not going well. Hire slowly, fire quickly, and then develop as many processes as you can. It's not like my team's perfect, but those are some of the lessons that help me hire people.
The question from Brian was about hiring someone I can do some of these tasks to take some things off my plate and hire them on a part-time basis or in a way that I can, hire them easily, fire them quickly, as the saying goes. I've thought about that too, and it's really hard to do that. Like, how would I get somebody to respond to a client via email the way I do, where I have to coerce them, or not coerce them, or explain to them the value of paying me $1,000 to, as Jess says sometimes, push a button, right? So I find it hard how I can do that, because email does take up a lot of my time. Putting up blog posts takes up a lot of my time, because I send out a weekly newsletter, and that takes tremendous time. Like, a lot of times I'm up till midnight Thursday getting it out for Friday morning. Some of that could be, but then, yeah, it's a challenge to find that to scale, to find an employee that can do that when it's such a personal business. But it's something that's on my radar, and that's kind of by hiring assistants. Now I'm not carrying all this gear to each stuff when Jess isn't available, or it's just, a challenging job and I need 2 assistants or something just to carry stuff.
We're gonna have time for one more question. A lot of hands, but you guys can catch up with them afterwards.
Sorry, bias.
I can talk to
You
you.
want Mary? Okay, I was gonna do, okay, so who else from the back? All right, yes. Yes.
All right, so
Yeah.
What kind of, Curtis Bragg Epilepsy Research Association, what kind of drone do you have and what kind of cameras do you have?
Yeah. The question is basically what kind of equipment I use, what drone do I have, what camera do I have? Well, all that changed last month. So I was a loyal Nikon shooter for 11 years, as you saw there. I switched to Sony mirrorless last month because I believe mirrorless cameras, like everybody's thinking, is the future. And Sony has the lead by far. So even though it's a massive investment of changing every lens, even my flashes and my triggers and things like that, I switched to the Sony a7R4 and got all basically the best lenses I could get for it for what I need to. And the previous 2 years I was flying a DJI Mavic Pro, and I just switched to the DJI Mavic 2 Pro last month as well. I chose that over a Phantom just because of, again, no clients were complaining about image quality, and I couldn't imagine having something bulky and having to put the props on like that. So this keeps super portable, still improve the image quality by getting the newer drone. And it's something I would consider in the future getting if they ever release a Phantom 5, or maybe even jumping to the Inspire level, but that's something for the future.
And I have a buddy with his drone license, and you said you might need backup pilots and stuff like that, so if I can get your card out.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we have 2 follow-up questions for you, Jason. Red or green?
Just like my traffic lights, I like it green.
Yeah! What can you do, I'm sorry, what can the community do for you?
The community if you see anybody or you know people who have mixed headshots on their site or non-professional photography, if you suggested that you know someone who really wants to help them visually represent themselves as professional as they actually are, so that when clients make that first impression, often through their website, they get that professional impression. That's kind of, maybe mention you know somebody like that. And also, I always like more subscribers to my newsletter. If you like my storytelling style and you like any of the photos you saw here, every Friday morning at 7 a.m. the newsletter goes out with 5 photos and usually a new drone video if I have one. And my semi-witty comments about what I've been up to and kind of crazy things that happen to me. So if you go to the blog portion of my website, there's a subscribe to newsletter there. So join the newsletter and you can hear this craziness every week. Yeah. Thank you.